Welcome, everyone, to the Gridiron Review Podcast. I'm Zach, that's Jack, and we are back for episode 2 of our Offseason in Review series. We are still in the AFC North, this time with the Baltimore Ravens, a team that was ravaged by injuries last season, yet still remained competitive to the very end. This offseason, we think they fared a lot better. And Jack, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so as we stated last time, we're going to break this down offense and defense. On offense, the Ravens were able to retain star backup quarterback Tyler Huntley, fullback Patrick Ricard, and backup center Tristan Colon. Their key losses was their makeshift backfield from injuries last year, Murray, Freeman, and Williams, Sammy Watkins, Miles Boykin, and Bradley Bozeman, the starting center. In terms of free agent pickups, they got Brett Hundley to be the third string, Mike Davis from Atlanta, and Morgan Moses. They traded Marquise Brown in the first round of this year's draft for the Arizona Cardinals first rounder. They also had to give up a third rounder, but we still think that was a great trade for them. In the draft, with that pick they got for Brown, they added Tyler Linderbaum. In the fourth, they added Daniel Falele, a massive tackle. 2 tight ends, Charlie Collar and Isaiah Likely, and another running back, Tyler Beatty. Based on the offseason moves that they've made, we believe that they are going to rotate their offense to a little bit of a different approach here, where you most likely play big slots. Duvernay is probably going to be expected to take a big step forward this year and replace Hollywood Brown as the deep threat. But, I mean, we love what they did, and if they can stay healthy, there's no reason that this offense can't win games in, a different style of offense in compared to what the NFL has become.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what the Ravens did when they drafted Lamar, they kind of, at least in my opinion, changed football a little bit. Lamar came in and I know there's always been rushing quarterbacks with Vic and Cunningham and, guys pop up here and there, but Lamar won an MVP. He's not developed as much as a passer, but we think that's partially on the Ravens. And, they opened the door again for running first quarterbacks like Malik Willis, who otherwise probably wouldn't have been drafted or at least fell very far past the third round or maybe even gotten asked to convert. And I think what you see now is them adapting again. I still don't like that they kept Greg Roman, but they're trying, in my opinion, to help Lamar out as best they can by getting him more tight ends to throw to, which is where he seems to thrive. His rapport with Hollywood was good. I mean, at least on his part. Now, catching the ball was Hollywood's problem, but his best is Mark Andrews, and I don't think that's really debatable. And now you get him 2 more tight ends that can catch the ball, and you can get really creative with it. And I think the thought is to make his life easier, and that hopefully leads to more passing development for him. Otherwise, it's going to be really interesting contract negotiations. You also did not mention their superstar undrafted free agent pickup, Slade Bolden, the one that everyone thought was going to be a New England Patriot, but they approached this offseason very interestingly. They definitely, realized that they had a lot of injuries at running back. Obviously, anyone that watches them know, I think their first, second, third, and fourth stringer all got hurt. And they lost Devontae Freeman, who actually had a pretty good career revitalization down the stretch for them. And Tyson Williams went to the Colts. And they added Mike Davis, who failed in Atlanta, but now he's in a role similar to what he had in Carolina, where he's not asked to be the main guy. He can just chip in, and that's where he did really well. And then they added Tyler Badie. I think Jack agrees that this is going to be a much improved Baltimore team, especially when you get more growth out of Tyler Huntley should Lamar get hurt again. I think for me, it was a freak injury. I don't think this is going to be a sign of things to come for Lamar. If I remember right, someone dove at his ankle. That would have resulted in anyone getting hurt. It had nothing to do with him taking an unnecessary hit or anything like that. And I think this offense is going to be super simple. They're going to throw 2-3 tight ends at a time out, and they're going to say, match up with our size, do it the best you can, and we're going to trust our guys to go down with it. I also like Rashad Bateman to take a massive step forward, and I like Duvernay to take a step forward. I think this offense, people are the narrative is going to be that they don't have the receiver depth. And like we even saw the other day that someone graded the Hollywood trade as a C- from NFL.com.
That was CBS. That wasn't NFL.
And it's just Hollywood was not that good. He's not that good. As the meme goes, he's not that guy. And I think you're going to see it in Arizona. He's going to have some good games, and you're going to have some where he drops the game-winning touchdown 3 times. So I think Baltimore is doing what they can. I still think I would have liked to see them hire a different coordinator, but on the offensive side, they they'll be a lot better.
I would just say to choose Roman over Martindale was definitely a decision. And I don't think anyone from the outside could look at it and be like, this is a great move. The only thing I would say to that is, had you fired Roman, now I still think that would have been the smarter move. You could be looking at an offense where it's not 3 tight ends, and maybe you're trying to throw the ball with a bunch of receivers with Lamar, and maybe it doesn't work out. And then, I mean, I like the thought of this because, like Zach said, Andrews has been Lamar's go-to target. So now, I mean, we talk about Atlanta playing big ball with Drake London and Pitts. I mean, now you have Bateman, Andrews, Collar, Boyle, and Likely. I mean, if you get a bunch of those guys out in the field, I don't think there's very few teams in the league that have the personnel on the back end to cover those types of guys.
I agree. Speaking of Martindale being fired, we are going to talk about the defense now. They were able to re-sign Calais Campbell, Josh Bynes, Christian Welch, and Tony Jefferson, and they did lose a lot. They lost Justin Ellis, Brandon Williams, although he's still a free agent, right?
Yeah.
Justin Houston, Parnell McPhee, LJ Fort, Chris Board, Jimmy Smith, Taven Young, Anthony Averett, and Deshaun Elliott. So it's a lot of backups for the most part, except the secondary is just a lot of depth pieces that actually saw some playing time due to how many injuries they had all over the board. The biggest one, I guess, to me is either one of the corners or Brandon Williams. However, they drafted Travis Jones, one of the many steals that the Ravens had. But for us, he was our only other true first-round talent at tackle. Yes, we had him ahead of Devontae Wyatt. And I think he's going to fill in the role that Williams is leaving exceptionally. And I think he's going to be very good. He gets to learn pass rushing, which I think is an upside in from Calais Campbell. And then they also drafted our number one prospect, Kyle Hamilton, to, even if you want to say replace Deshaun Elliott, he's going to be better than Deshaun Elliott. And with that safety room, they also added Marcus Williams. I almost say Kyle Fuller. So now they have Chuck Clark, Marcus Williams, and Kyle Hamilton. We think they'll run a lot of 3 safety looks unless one of the safeties is moved. It was reported that there was a trade involving
Jalen Reagor for Chuck Clark, and the Eagles did not take it. We will cover that trade more when we get to the Eagles. But just kind of building off the losses here, I mean, we talk about Young and Averett and these guys being backup pieces. I think the one thing to note here is Brandon Williams and Houston and McPhee are all guys that have been in the league for over 10 years now. That's huge veteran leadership. And I get that you bring back Campbell, but like we said, Williams is a free agent. You can't rule out bringing him back. I think that has to do more with money right now than anything. In terms of the backers, they lost LJ Fort, Chris Board. Those are special teams players. And if anyone is questioning why I'm talking about special teams, look at the 2000 whatever Chargers where they had the number one offense, number one defense, and completely missed the playoffs. Again, those are guys that you could probably bring back on smaller deals, but their losses are a lot more about the leadership and the role players, which, when you look at Baltimore's defense in the last X amount of years, that's where they thrive, is situational pass rushers and special teams players and all these guys that do the little things right.
I mean, yeah, to your point, also, as of recording this, I don't think a lot of their losses on defense have signed elsewhere. So there's a good chance, like you saw them bringing Kyle Fuller just recently, that some of these guys do come back and they continue building up what should be one of the better defenses in the league. They also added Vince Beagle, Brent Urban. They brought back Michael Pierce. And again, as we mentioned, Kyle Fuller and Marcus Williams. And in the draft, we've talked about their draft. They were a number one ranked draft class, steals up and down the board. Jack talked about the offensive pieces already. On the defensive side, Kyle Hamilton, again, our number one overall prospect. David Ojabo, we know he tore his Achilles, but absolute steal. And with the personnel they have, he's not going to be rushed back into it. But when he does come in, we think he's going to be special. Travis Jones, again, one of our favorite picks on the 3rd round. Jalen Armour Davis, who might, I think, fill a special teams role early as he develops more, but he's a high upside corner. This isn't really defense, but they took Jordan Stout, punter in the 4th round. And then they also took Demarion Williams, another player that I think starts on special teams and then works his way into the corner room, which is already stacked. So, they lost a lot of depth role players on the offensive and defensive side, but they've adapted on the offensive side to do a different style of play. And on defense, their draft and their free agent pickups I mean, that's what good teams do. You lose players and you re-sign the ones you can, and then you replace the ones that you lost with a similar style, a new style, a different concept, like running three safeties high, or running a three safety defense instead of, letting your corners get hurt all the time, or whatever they decide to do.
The other thing that we talked about in terms of the three safeties is someone like Hamilton, who played all over at Notre Dame, or Chuck Clark. You could throw one of them at a nickelbacker, because at the end of the day, it does not sound like Queen nor Malik Harrison have made the strides that they would have hoped for when they drafted them a few years back. So, I mean, it just provides more opportunity for different looks, for nicer matchups, and kind of building off, I mean, like the Jalen Armour Davis pick and the Demarion Williams pick. Yeah, they'll probably play special teams right off the bat. The important thing to note here is when you look at what happened last year, it's kind of weird because it seems like every 5 years or so, Baltimore has a year where they have 37 injuries, but they were starting guys like Chris Westry and Brandon Stevens and all these guys you've never heard of. So we're right now, they might be 7 deep at corner and 4 deep at safety. This, I think, has more to do with we need to be prepared for what might come again. And I'm a lot more comfortable with having Armour Davis and Williams out there than anything I watched last year.
Yeah, and that's a big point. And there's a few other teams when we cover them that their starting lineup is great, but their depth is awful. And if they suffer injuries, they're in trouble. And I don't feel like that's the case with Baltimore, at least on the defensive side, where if they have Marcus Peters go down again, or, one of the safeties go down, there's people ready to step up and take the place. And I think that that's huge with an extra game in the season and a new AFC that's going to be a pass-happy league. I think Baltimore's done a good job of beefing up their defensive line, adding a pass rusher, a high upside pass rusher to go on with the guy they drafted last year. And I am blanking on his name. Oh, yeah. Okay. I was thinking Tryon, but I was like, no, I know that's Tampa. They could form a really wicked pass rushing duo once Ojabo comes back and is healthy. And I think Baltimore is taking one of the few teams that is addressing this shootout of an AFC and doing a different take on it, going a different way. And I think it could work. I mean, as we said, we have Baltimore as the second in the division and one of the wild cards at 13-4, with 2 of their losses coming against Cincinnati just because Burrow seems to have their number. That might not be the case. This year might be different. And, as long as I think it does kind of rest on Lamar a little bit. Huntley, I think, is a very good backup. I still believe he's probably got a year more development because he was, undrafted. But it's hard to find a better backup that matches what you have in a starter, especially when the talent is as rare as Lamar in his skill set. And so even if Lamar goes down, I think Huntley with another season under his belt will do better. Along with, as we said, just having 3 tight ends that can catch passes is any quarterback's best friend.
Just kind of building off what Zach said in terms of the AFC, and we said it in the Browns episode, is that this is going to be an overlying theme of the bloodbath of the AFC, is that you look at teams like Buffalo, who added, Shakir, brought back McKenzie and Crowder. Kansas City brought in MVS, Juju, Sky Moore. Raiders brought in Devontae. The point is, everyone seems to be building their team in the same way, that you need to run a spread to win. But at the end of the day, I've talked to Zach about this, is can Lamar win a shootout against a Mahomes or an Allen or whoever? In some cases, it might be yes. In some cases, it might be no. If you put all your receivers out there, there's absolutely no way you're doing it. I don't think Prochet and Duvernay and Bateman are going to get it done in the way that other teams do. But if you play matchup ball the way that we think that Baltimore is going to do it this year, you're probably getting downfield just as quick as anyone else. I mean, if you have Likely and Andrews in the slot with Bateman and Duvernay down on the outsides, who's going to cover that? There's very few teams that can be like, oh, well, we'll just switch our personnel. We have this. There's not many. So it's a different approach. I think the important thing here for Baltimore is that they can make the late push, as compared to previous years, because they have defensive pieces everywhere. Like And there's not one spot on this defense where you're like, oh, that's a weakness. Well, maybe linebacker, but even at that, there's some depth there. And, you know, if that really ends up being your Achilles heel this year, you address it next year.
And for to that point, a lot of teams find linebackers on the street halfway through the season that are productive.
Devondre Campbell.
Devondre Campbell in Houston, Camus Grugier-Hill bounced around, and then he actually had I think over 100 tackles for them. Like I just think if there's a weak position on your defense, middle linebacker, you can, you know, if you can play a nickel backer with one of the safeties, you can find someone off the street that can fill the role, or maybe, you know, the young guys take a step forward. You have anything you want to throw in there? Good. All right. Well, that concludes our episode on the Ravens. Tomorrow will be Pittsburgh.
Yes.
And then after that, we'll close out the AFC North.